Hey everybody, it's your old pal Chuck doing a vlog, and it's going to be completely different than anything I've ever done before. I realized the other day that about just quarter of a way, maybe a little less, through my seventh or eighth cycle of watching reruns of the TV show MASH on MeTV. And it actually got me thinking that besides wrestling and music, um, one of the main constants through my life, and I'm a little over a month away or so, well, a little more than a month away from being 45 years old. Uh, I'm reflecting, but it's music, wrestling, and MASH, believe it or not. MASH has been a constant through my life. Now, I'm sure many of you who are close to my age, we've experienced MASH the same way. At least the first time was with snow days, sick days, days off from school, home or at our grandparents' house, watching the reruns right before The Price is Right, which then led into the 12 o'clock news. Uh, and maybe just giving that little teaser of the schedule, you can figure out. Well, I think most of you know where I'm from, but you can figure out the networks and stuff. And one thing that got me thinking is that how at different stages of life, MASH can be many different things. Now, I want to tell you that it wasn't until relatively recently that I discovered there has been so many scholarly works written about MASH. And when I say MASH, I want to correct myself and make sure we're on the same page. I am talking about the long running television series. The finale was the most watched non sports event in history. It is actually a much larger franchise. It's a book series, an Academy Award winning movie. But we're talking about the series because I think the television series, had the most impact and has touched more people than any of that other stuff. Um, but yeah, I realized that at different points, MASH can mean different things. For example, like as I mentioned, I first got into it watching it in syndicated reruns as a small child with days off and holiday, snow sick days, holidays. We didn't get snow days here. That's a vlog for another time. But for me, it was just a quirky, funny little show about doctors and a military base in a war, I think, and stuff like that. And then as I got a little older, I knew it was the 4077th and I knew it was the Korean War. But I knew nothing of the Korean War, and I'll be very honest with you, at the age I was, I shouldn't have. But I found the doctors funny. It was the hijinks. Then I got a little bit older. I started learning about the Korean War, so I started understanding more uh, about the names and locations they were talking about, the situations they found themselves in, while still enjoying a lot of the work. And of course, over time, I began to appreciate the work of some of the other actors, like Alan Alda, who, let's be honest, he was the one who had the best career post MASH, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But then as I continued to grow, I understood more about the Korean War. It was a police action, not really a war. All the politics behind it, and how really, for the first time in American history, the end of the Korean War was not a decisive victory for the U.S. I began to see more of the trauma that the characters were experiencing. I began to notice more the patients and what they were going through. Began to notice a lot more of the guest stars and stuff like that. Here's a little bit of little Easter egg for you. Larry Hama, the godfather of GI Joe. He does have an acting history, and he did appear in at least one or two episodes of MASH. I just saw one the other day, so that was kind of cool. I always wondered if the character of Colonel Flag on MASH was in a roundabout sort of way an influence for General Flag from GI Joe, but whatever. But then now we keep going as you get into adulthood, And you really and get to the point where I am now that I'm realizing a lot of things. Just number one, the split in the series from medical sitcom to dramedy. And a lot of that was fostered by Alan Alda's vision and direction and influence. Also, finding out a lot of the backside information, behind the scenes stuff about why people were leaving and things of that nature and the transitions through time. Also, just watching it now, I've come to a lot of realizations that I really didn't get when I was a kid. And I really think the first one is um, out of the whole cast, even with the turnovers and stuff, I would say that the two characters that were consistently good and I would say are honorable people were Klinger and Dr. BJ Honeycutt. And the reason I say Klinger first is there's an early season episode. A bomb has landed in the camp, did not detonate. They all think they're going to die. So Klinger goes to Father Mulcahy to talk to him. And instead of wearing a dress, Klinger is in this beautiful three-piece zoot suit. As he says, that's what he wore to the draft board that day. And he said he wanted, if he was going to die, he wanted to die the way, he came in, sort of guard. But he, as Father Mulcahy, he said he barely recognized Klinger, and as Klinger said, he says, I don't want you to. I want to explain to you why I wear dresses. I don't want you to think I'm crazy. Um, it's just as a Lebanese American, I have such a love for life that it appalls me to be part of something that could so willingly and indiscriminately take it. And to me, that's one of the most important episodes of MASH, that we got an explanation why Klinger is the way he was. And really from that point on, it changed the way I look at Klinger, and it really changed the way, like, why he did what he did and how he behaved. And as the series progressed, as you saw the growth of his character, when he got that promotion to sergeant and he started taking things seriously, number one, it's like he began to develop this respect for the military. Now, in real life, Jamie Farr was a father with children, and he was concerned about his kids being made fun of at school for him wearing dresses. So that was also part of the transition. By the way, a little extra thing about Jamie Farr. Turns out the guy, everything about Klinger was Jamie Farr. He was one of the few legitimate Korean War veterans on the show. His dog tags were his actual dog tags. Paco's Lebanese sausage went there all the time. He's the Prince of Toledo now, but also lifelong professional wrestling fan. This comes from Rikishi, who met Jamie Farr at a convention, and Jamie Farr expressed deep admiration for him. So there's a little bit of that. The second character I said was the only inherently good one was BJ Honeycutt. BJ came in around the beginning of season 4. He had to replace Trapper John MD because Wayne Rogers had become frustrated with the diminished role of Trapper and was actually having some issues with Alan Alda behind the scenes. More on that later. So he wanted to leave. Unfortunately, and you're going to hear this a lot, Wayne Rogers' career never really recovered. Even though he continued to live into the mid 2010s and had a second career as an investment expert and commentator appearing on MSNBC, CNBC, and stuff like that, his acting career never really picked up before he passed away. Now, BJ Honeycutt was a straight laced father. His wife had just given birth before or was expecting. Then I think just given birth before he was drafted and sent overseas. And you see throughout the remainder of the series how he struggles with being away from home, how his wife Peg, he feels shame that she has to do things on her own that he should be there for. And in fact, there's one episode he becomes so upset that she had to ask a neighbor for help. He like starts hustling any which way to get extra money to send home. And Major Houlihan, Margaret, finally has to scream at him. You have so much to lose because you had so much to begin with while we have nothing. And it was just a sobering thought that he had a family while so many of them didn't. And it was this great touching moment. Now, now with that being said, the flip side is I kind of started to realize that characters like Trapper John, Hawkeye, even Father Mulcahy were not that honorable. Trapper John was a married man cheating on his wife overseas. Hawkeye was a womanizer. Brilliant surgeons, saved a lot of lives, but they morally weren't that good. And Father Mulcahy, as a Catholic priest, I don't really think stewarded the values of Catholicism and Christ enough to these soldiers to keep them in line. And there were several episodes where it was kind of like he was making excuses for what they're going through. And as someone who has spent a lot of time with clergy and has studied the faith, you don't make excuses like that. When it's that much harder, that's when you push back even harder, you know? And I didn't see him doing that. I mean, we already knew characters like Major Burns. He was meant to be a villain. Colonel Blake, again, a guy who again married. I think he had daughters. Womanizing drunk. McLean Stevenson. If you remember from an old podcast I used to do, we used to talk about McLean Stevenson. There was a guy who, unfortunately, thought and this was an actual quote, that the American people loved him more than they did. As he said, they didn't love me, they loved the character. And him leaving MASH, again, thinking he was the star of an ensemble show, his career never really recovered, and he even admitted that leaving MASH when he did was it was the biggest regret of his career. Now, unfortunately, like Wayne Rogers, McLean Stevenson has been dead for some time. In fact, he passed away. He didn't even make it into the 2000s. But you just look at it like that, and that really changes things and changes your opinion of what they're going through. Another thing is, if you've just seen bits and pieces of the show MASH and then watched the finale. Now, keep in mind, the finale is only shown during certain times of the year, Memorial Day, Independence Day, stuff like that, because it's like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour event. This was a major finale. And if you really just saw that, you were like, well, what happened with Hawkeye? And to give you a little spoiler, Hawkeye has a massive breakdown before the beginning of the finale, and he's actually in a mental institution. But if you watch the series and watch it through adult eyes, you see how Hawkeye just bottles up so much and doesn't know how to let his emotions out. You have these little releases here and there. When he goes off on radar after saving his life, the night terrors, the times that Sydney had to come and visit him, it really, you start to see that, yeah, this guy's got a lot going on and he's not taking care of it. Maybe it was ignored because at the end of the day, he was a top surgeon, and cutters got to cut. But to see that now, and Hawkeye's journey, and we talked about Radar, and I know a lot of you were saying, well, Radar was like the avatar for the viewer. We experience things through him. Well, Radar, but he was also a little bit of a pervert, especially early on. Now, for years, it was kind of funny. my dad used to swear up and down that they had problems with Gary Berghoff, the actor who played Radar, on set. And he just did not get along with people. But everything I've read, it's to the contrary. He was the most beloved actor. And in fact, Mike Farrell, the actor who plays BJ Honeycutt, and I would say the only other actor from MASH to have a successful post-MASH career, he said that Gary was the best actor out of all of them and begged him to stay. Now, and that's the other thing. I never caught on that Rader left the show 2 seasons before, 2 or 3 seasons before the finale. That was like, wow. My opinion, looking at it from there, I think the series should have ended when Radar left, because you had Klinger very quickly be moved into that position, and it just didn't work, at least in my opinion. But Gary Berghoff said in interviews that he was being typecast, and also what was happening was there were too many incidents of people coming up to him when he was out with his family and, wanting to talk to Radar and not really caring much about Gary. Another little Easter egg about Gary Berghoff. If you remember, it was like a season 1 episode where they had a talent show. Gary Berghoff was actually and he's still alive, mind you, is a very talented jazz drummer. So when you see him playing the drums in MASH, he's really playing the drums. Very talented. He actually had a jazz band. That's why you really didn't see much of him. They tried to give him a spin-off show, but he was touring the country with his jazz band. So he was able to do that. And then, Burns, the actor who, Larry Linville, he said that he left because he felt that the character of Major Burns had gone as far as it could. And I'll be honest with you, when Colonel Potter came in, you had BJ, Burns just didn't fit anymore. And around that time, the bigger thing was the growth of Margaret Houlihan. So Burns left. We're going to go back to that in a minute. But to see now as an adult how Major Houlihan went from this again, the other villain of the show, but to see her growth and to see her struggle as a female in the military, trying to be respected, trying to get ahead, and how they turned her behavior to the point where I would say by the end of the series, her and Hawkeye were friends, and there's actually a point where I kind of figured her and Hawkeye were going to end up together. Completely different woman. You saw her get married, divorced, struggle with that. A lot of times she was the voice of reason, something she never was in the earlier seasons. It really is just a brilliant arc, a character study. And I'm sure there has been scholarly works written about the growth and change and development of Major Margaret Houlihan on MASH. And keep in mind, for a long-running show, you need stuff like that. You need those kind of changes. So Burns left. He became a lieutenant colonel and the head of a VA hospital, which enraged everyone since he was an incompetent doctor. So what do you replace him with? You replace him with a top surgeon, Charles Emerson Winchester III. Pop your collars, Charlies of the world. I'm sorry. But, again, number one, growing up, I saw him as a villain. And number two, I thought him and Houlihan were in a relationship. They basically just slotted out Burns and slotted him in. And that's completely wrong. Number one, yes, him and Houlihan were respectable to each other, enjoying the sophisticated things of life. But Major Winchester was not really that bad of a guy, and he certainly wasn't as bad as Major Burns. When push came to shove, Major Winchester did the right thing, and he did it often. And again, this is another one of those actors. He actually had a very good post-MASH career. He did a lot of voiceover work for video games, and he got to play not the birth father, but like the sort of adopted father of Dr. Isles on Rizzolian Isles, and I think it was his last acting role before he passed away. I'm trying to think I can't think of his name right now, but it really, a lot of times you saw him, and how the war affected him. There's this one episode where he almost got shot in the head. And we found out, like, coming that close to death, he wanted to know what it was like. And the reason being is he lost a sibling when he was much, much younger. And he couldn't never come to terms with that. And we also saw how he was a doting brother to his sister who actually stuttered. And we found this out because he protected and defended a soldier who was being abused by his infantrymen for stuttering. And they thought he was stupid. He was actually a brilliant human being. But again, like when push came to shove, Winchester was there and stood up for what was right. And it's unfortunate, his arc really ended on a sour note where there was a Chinese band division that they had taken prisoner, and he was trying to get them to play classical music, and he got it just right, but then they were being transferred to a larger camp. And what ended up happening is their truck was bombed and they were all killed. And Winchester became so distraught, he destroyed one of his beloved records, and he would never be able to listen to music ever again. And that's very sad. Now, that's not to say there weren't some faults with Winchester. It was mentioned throughout the show that he was a vehement anti-Catholic, which, going back to the 50s, that was a common thing. But what was also interesting about MASH is how they would bring in prejudices from the 50s, but also bring in social commentary that applied to what was going on in the world at that time. The Vietnam War, things of that nature, social change, racism, all of that, and how they were able to comment on it. But I mean, it really is. I mean, people have said time and again that MASH is the greatest show in the history of television, and I have to agree 100%. And I have to say that there is no discussion otherwise. Please don't try to bring up some Japanese anime artsy fartsy stuff. It's not the same. This show consistently delivered and truly is one of the best. Now, one person we really haven't talked about much is Alan Alda as Hawkeye. And one of the things as an adult and researching and looking it up, Alan Alda caused a lot of problems behind the scenes. We talked about how Wayne Rogers had left because of the fact that as soon as Alan Alda was hired, the focus was not going to be on Trapper John MD, and yes, I just said that because of the spin-off show in a second, but that, they were making Hawkeye have all the qualities that Trapper John should have had, and he should have been the better doctor, but that he was also getting the choice comedy bits, the storylines. So he had to leave, and he felt, and it was leading to conflict with him and Alan Alda, who was there who, by the way, was a second generation actor, and he was trying to protect his spot. He too was a Korean War veteran, by the way, but as he mentioned, he came in when people were going home, so he oversaw a mess tent. And then again, McLean Stevenson, the same issue with Alan Alda, that the comedy should have been more for him. And if you look at those first 3 seasons, yeah, Colonel Blake really was carrying the show right there with Hawkeye. So I think he had a bit of a point to make there. But Alan Alda was the one, because he was also a writer and director, who began the shift from comedy to dramedy. And I think it was the episodes that were more dramedy than comedy Alan Alda won his Emmy Awards for. The letters writing home to dad, the more cerebral type episodes, stuff like that. And by the way, don't forget, MASH was groundbreaking because they did episodes that had never been done before. We got a whole episode that was told from the point of view of a patient. We had those narration episodes where Radar and Hawkeye would be writing letters home talking about what was going on. We had the episode where Hawkeye wrote his last will and testament, and then there was the one where he had the concussion, and Alan Alda had this great monologue talking about being a doctor in his life and stuff like that. There was the clip show episodes, which were done as like newsreels and special reports. None of that had been done before. But, again, it was Alan Alda controlling the show and driving people off and even causing friction among the writers. It kind of, it's kind of stuff that wouldn't happen today. I mean, shows have been shut down, people have been fired for less. So there's that. But again, Alan Alda, one of the most respected and beloved actors in history, television and cinema and theater. He's done it all, and he is still around, and things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, I really want to wrap up my little look here at MASH. You guys need to watch the show, and you need to watch all of it, and you'll really get that appreciation for it. Now, a couple of little extra points that I wanted to mention. The episode where Colonel Blake leaves and he's being sent home, the ending, which I'm going to have to give it away, when Radar comes in to announce that his plane had been shot down and there were no survivors, none of the cast except for Gary Burkhoff knew what was going to be said. So when you see the camera pan, those are the legitimate reactions from the actors. The actress playing Houlihan started crying. The look of shock on Major Burns, Father Mulcahy, and then that look at the end with Trapper John and Hawkeye looking at each other and then going back to work, and that silence. That was all a legitimate reaction. And again, I don't think that's something that would happen today. I think you would have had the actors and actresses of today just be like, what the heck, and ruin the scene. Now let's see, there was that. Oh, MASH was filmed on the same set as the movie, which was in one of the deserts in California. The producers would get so frustrated with the cast sending them notes on the script that to punish them and to get them to stop, they would film winter episodes when they all had to be in heavy coats surrounded by gas drums with fire coming up on the hottest days of the year. So when you see those winter episodes and they're shivering and they're trying to stay warm, keep in mind that it's probably 90 to 100 degrees, if not more, and they're actually dying. So that's kind of fun. And then finally, as you've probably caught in this video, I've referred to Dr. John McIntyre as Trapper John MD. That's because in the early 80s, Pernell Roberts had a spin-off show called Trapper John MD. Well, there was some friction and issue between the producers of the MASH television series and the producers of Trapper John over who had the rights to the character. And that the way they got around this, and by the way, we're not going to talk about Trapper John. I'm sure most of you know there's a whole thing about that show. But basically the way they got around it was to say Trapper John MD, the television series, was a spin-off from the movie, not the television series. The television series did actually have two spin-offs. After MASH, which lasted about 2 seasons barely. The first episode was a massive success, so CBS proceeded to put a drawing in showing Klinger in a nurse's outfit shaving B.A. Baracus' Mr. T's mohawk as a drawing, and it was in all the papers, TV Guide, the trade journals. A-Team then proceeded to kick their butt for the remainder of the run, and the series just fell to the bottom of the ratings, and I think there was even a couple episodes that to this day have never aired in America. And it's considered one of the worst television shows in history, and the worst spin-off in history. Beyond that, Radar also got a spin-off called Walter, and it was spelt the same way as MASH. Basically, the families had to sell the farm, and Walter has moved to the city to become a police officer. The pilot was never picked up and was only shown once as a Sunday night or Saturday night special presentation, like a mini movie, and that was it. I've never seen it. I don't know how good it was, but the fact that the pilot was never picked up kind of tells you. But, in a way, I would say if there were like spin offs and sequels, it would really diminish the impact and the greatness that was MASH, the series. And I know we've gone about 30 minutes now, so I'm going to end it there. Just urging you once again, if you never have, watch the show and appreciate the artistry that it is. This is your old pal Chuck. Until I talk to you once again.